Chapter 5. Deviations. The road before us was dark. Allie and I were now a couple, and not just that, we were now engaged to be married. Everything else had happened so quickly. Why not this? We both knew. Besides, every single day we went out here, the world might end. I'd rather go out hopeful, and I knew she felt the same. Something told both of us, though, we had a lot to hope for, and there'd be no ending today. Either that or we were blinded by love and giddily optimistic. We had talked and snuggled the time away, and even joked with Foxy that he could be the ring bearer. He happily obliged. The driver informed us that we were now past Russellville on Highway 68. It was 1649 hours. With any luck, we would be to the cave around 1745 or 1750 hours. About an hour to go. The other tank radioed that they needed a pit stop. Sounded good to me. I turned to Allie, my fiancée. She looked radiant, sitting there with my necklace adorning her graceful, soft neck. It was silly and perhaps a bit juvenile how we did it. But then again, we'd all been frozen in time with a fair dose of arrested development since 2026. I don't really think anyone would or could blame us if proposals weren't exactly picture perfect. It was she and I, and it was love, and we were committed to each other, take it or leave it. "I love you," I whispered to her, wrapping my left arm around her and pulling her tightly against me. "I love you too," she gleamed, but then her expression changed. "But I really have to pee. Bye." I chuckled. "After you." She stood and grasped the underside of the hatch, wobbling with the vehicle and doing her own little gotta go dance until we came to a stop. When Allie opened the hatch, I'd never seen her move so fast. She barged out like there was a grenade in here. "Be careful, Allie," I barked. We still needed to use caution. None of us had ever been out this way before, except maybe Joe and Allie on the trip to my blockade in Clarksville. But then I remembered that they had come through tunnels as well. In any event, they would have been coming from southeast of us, from Alpharetta. The highway our tanks were rumbling up was undiscovered country for all of us. I popped my head out and checked the sky, rifle at the ready, just in case. All was clear. I thought I saw some movement in the far recesses of the late afternoon clouds, but nothing close. I glanced over at the other tank and saw Raleigh doing the same dance that Allie had been doing. She scampered off not too far away behind some abandoned cars on the side of the highway. Joe popped out next, followed by Monzone. Both sets of drivers and gunners shut off the tanks, emerged, and made small talk while they ate some snacks and relieved themselves. Simpson and our gunner lit up smokes. Joe leapt off the back of the tank with a heavy thud to the ground below. Not so spry at 52 as he probably was at 25, he dusted himself off, grinned at me, and sauntered over. "Cam, congratulations, man," he said, giving me a high five. "I knew about you two lovebirds the morning of our mission at Harville. Before I found you and Ruddy in the restroom, you ticked her off by playing Cool Hand Luke, remember?" "Yeah, I figured you caught that. Never a good idea." "Yeah, I know that now. Thanks." "Anyway, congrats. I mean it. I've known Trudy more than a few years. She's quite a lady. Tough, sincere, smart, quite the fighter. All essential qualities for Mrs. Lieutenant Allison Shipley." He grinned again. I smiled at him. "I dig it. I can get used to that," I said, fist bumping him. He place-slapped me in the shoulder and then moved past me. "Where you going?" I asked. He turned around and looked at me quizzically. "Hey, us married folks gotta pee too. You'll learn," he said, putting his hands out in helplessness. He smiled and turned back around to pee off the highway. I made a note to myself to ask him later about his wife, Maureen. He hadn't talked much about her. I snorted and turned back to the sky. Sunset was almost here, and that usually meant Gorgons. It was so surreal. Being out here amidst so much expanse, so far from home, protected by these two shiny humps on the back of these tanks. I didn't quite feel impervious yet, but darn near close. No one had ever ventured out of DN 436 so far, much less returned. I walked to the back of our tank and kissed my fingers, touching them on the black humming hump resting there in a pseudo-blessing. At the same time, I could feel current running through my digits as I received a minuscule electric shock. Sort of like when Ruddy and I would dare each other to touch a live 9-volt battery to our tongue. Ruddy. I wonder what he'd think if he could see us all now, especially Allie and me. He told us he had a feeling about us in that bathroom back at Harville, and then let us out of the bathroom as a doorman. Such a gallant goofball. I missed him, but that memory made me smile. And as if on cue, here came Foxy. "Hey, Lieutenant," he said, playfully saluting me. "Hey, you, watch the manners, Junior." I grabbed him, put him in a loose headlock, and gave him a noogie. His hat came loose, and his blonde locks spilled out. "I said respect the main," he cried out. I chuckled. "You hit the bathroom? Ready to go on?" "Yep, where's the future Mrs. Shipley?" I smiled. "She's over that way," I said, gesturing in the direction Allie had scampered off to, "and the rest of them are over there. I better hit the John myself. Hold here for me, will ya?" Nodding, he took my XM5. All were done and heading back to the group. Monzone and Raleigh were approaching as well. Allie had returned and was now conversing freely with Foxy and Joe. She was showing them her necklace, and I watched them congratulate her with a warmth that filled my heart. The sight of it made me so glad. I didn't see the tank drivers or the gunners, but Foxy was loudly ripping open a giant bag of stale Doritos in brash defiance of the ever-present terror. He grabbed a handful and mashed them into his mouth, crunching obnoxiously. The others laughed as he did so. I checked my watch, 1704 hours already. A few minutes from sunset. We'd get in a little later now, but that was okay. Our driver came, walking up behind Joe with his own driver. "Hey gang, we've never formally met. I'm Simpson, and this is Ollie. We radioed ahead to DN312, so they got an ETA on us now. Should be there about 1800 if we keep making the same pace. Not too bad." "Yeah," said Ollie, "a little over an hour to go now. You guys ready to load up?" "Yeah, let's do it," said Foxy. He had no sooner said that when we heard a distinct radar ping alert coming from the console of the tank closest to us. All of us turned in curiosity and then looked back up at the horizon, doing a double take. Something vast was drawing near. I heard Allie breathe, "What is that?" We didn't wait for an answer. In response, we all silently bolted for our vehicles. At that moment, to our northeast and coming straight down the skyline at breakneck speed, was a dense horde of black shapes, blocking out all light behind them. We needed no explanation. We knew exactly what they were, and they were coming at us fast. We dropped back inside the tanks and donned our masks. I didn't think the Gorgons would come anywhere close to us with our DTFs, but they all appeared to be packed so tightly together, moving in formation, something we'd never seen before. I heard Simpson giggle a pretend fear-based chuckle as he scurried back to the driver's seat. He was actually smiling, although he looked a bit nervous, but the bravado he had built up, reinforced by the protection afforded us by DTFs, tanks, guns, and helmets, was apparently enough for him. He clambered up and swiftly threw himself into the front of the tank as we closed our respective hatches. The situation felt strangely like my old birds when I would reach my hand into their cage, and instinctively they'd disappear inside their ratty straw nests. In our own tank, the radar was now going crazy. I'm sure theirs was as well. As when we had approached Harville Hall, the screen had a massive clustered bright blue signal practically dripping from the top of the screen, slowly, like thick maple syrup, converging toward the center. Allie, Foxy, and I peeked up into the cab from the back, staring at it. Every time that radar ping would swing around, it grew in mass and density, and the signal was approaching swiftly. "Contact 4,500 meters bearing north 067 east and closing. 4,000 meters. Man, they're booking," Simpson uttered. We were all jockeying for position, trying to get our own glimpses out the tiny window on the front. It was crowded in there. Our gunner had hopped in, and he was also watching the radar intently, blocking our view. So much for a quiet journey. The captain said that we would most likely run into Gorgons on the way up. Here came the party, straight at us. Just then I remembered back in the data room with the Beast and that massive Gorgons flying through the Bermuda Triangle that Pete had pointed out to us. I wondered if this group was the same one. But why were they all packed so densely together like that? 3,000 meters bearing N062E, Simpson sounded. 2,800 bearing 061. 2,700. He began to pick his lip. In a reflex, I cast a glance behind us at the inner walls of the tank. Rows and rows of guns, grenades, rockets, sidearms, and masks, as much as could be fit into the belly of these beasts, still allowing for 5 humans, which was already over capacity. Many of these masks were meant for DN-312, the blockade at Mammoth Cave. Instinctively, I went for an M5, latched a few grenades onto my clips, and tightened my mask before turning back to them. "What tank model is this anyway?" I asked Simpson, and I could hear the nervous tension in my own voice. He didn't answer. He was focusing on the screen. "M1E3 Abrams," the gunner said. So it is an Abrams, I thought. They're sturdy and rugged. I didn't know what that would afford us, but it was some comfort that they were the best. "What's your name, Guns?" I asked our gunner. "Vitas, sir," he greeted back. "Well, Vitas, let us know what's coming, okay? Don't be shy either, and don't ask for permission to shoot him down. You go to town on those bad boys." "Yes, sir," he shouted back over his shoulder, and then snuggled up against his gun sight. "Oh, baby," he muttered momentarily. "That's a big old crowd of Gorgons, sir. Saddle up, everybody, here comes the party." I tried to shift past Allie to view the radar screen. Peering over her shoulder, I heard her breath catch. She had her grip on her sidearm and was staring intently at the screen. Foxy was beside her, licking his lips nervously. 2100-059, chimed Simpson. He himself had raised up an XM5 and held onto it as he watched. 1900, 1850. And that's when we all heard it. The humming. Except now it was amplifying. Allie and I had heard that sound up close in the library near Harville, and I had heard it even closer in the hallways of that forsaken church. But there on that highway, it was like a throng of angry murder hornets intent on a kill. Murder hornets, I thought. I shook my head. "Hear that?" I asked them. Allie nodded silently and slowly. Foxy was looking up toward the roof of the tank and said nothing. The other tank was completely silent. They saw them coming as well and were monitoring them just as intently as we were. There was no understood plan except to defend ourselves as best as we could. 1300, 12, 058, Simpson relayed. "Command, we have numerous inbound signals." The humming increased exponentially. Simpson turned to Vitas. "Okay, time to play. Light him up, V," he suddenly yelled, and then he radioed to the other tank. 82, this is 131, thump and dump. Repeat, thump and dump. 1,000 meters bearing N060E. Our turret began to turn eastward. "Roger," came the quick burst over the headset. 750 meters in closing bearing N059E, thundered Simpson. "Hold tight, everybody." "What are you gonna—" I tried to say, but then the turret exploded and shot out a massive projectile dead ahead toward the approaching throng. "Ah!" I screamed, falling back and covering my ears. Foxy and Allie both shrieked in pain. The din reverberated like thunder inside that tank. Then another blast rang out behind us from MS-82. Both of our beasts launched a salvo of DTFs at the other beasts, and then quickly powered down. We all eagerly jockeyed for a look out the window. Out through the tiny slit, I could see a dark cloud framed against 2 tiny specks of light. All at once, the evening sky was lit up like a blinding storm. In the light, I could sense all of us recoil as we squinted and covered our eyes. It was difficult to make out what exactly was happening, but just then the blast wave hit us, and both tanks shuddered noisily. A dim film of yellowish dust was left behind from the blast, coating the window. We could just make out the fierce and angry wailing and shrieking of the enemy from afar, still closing in. 82, 131, cycle up, go for cycle up, Simpson yelled, and started the tank back up. It roared to life. Now I understood. Those big ones still acted like an EMP, and for that we had to power down or they'd fry our electronics in that dangerous electromagnetic pulse. The president had said that. However, once it had passed, it was safe to power back up again. The Warhorse Morses were not of the same magnitude, but still put out their irritating 3-second interval DTFs. That's how they were keeping them at bay. It's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough, I thought, but dismissed it as pessimism. The radar was back up, and Simpson confirmed my fears. Contact persists, he called out. 500 meters closing fast. 450 bearing 058. They've split. 2 groups, 82. Repeat, 2 groups. 400 meters bearing 057, 061. Oh, crap, he screamed. We looked back and forth between him and the radar, our pulses pounding. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. He was right. They had separated. While the signal truly had diminished greatly in size due to the larger DTFs taking out a bunch of them, they had now split into two distinct groups, blue masses converging on the center of the screen and closing fast. The surviving Gorgons had flown through the DTF burst. What? I asked myself. How? 82, this is 131. Switch to guns and light up the sky. Go, go, go! Simpson was clearly in a panic. Go, V, go, baby, he urged. 82, 131, we'll take the left. You've got the right. Repeat, you're on the left, we're on the right. Vetus didn't waste a minute, and neither did the other tank. The muted thunder scorched the air around us and lit up the early night sky, blasting at the blob that was screaming toward us. Simpson, Vetus, no! Allie shouted. You're shooting at the same targets. You messed it up. Repeat, 131 did not copy. Repeat, over. Ollie screamed from the other tank. Simpson screamed, incoming, 300 meters. There they are. Allie screamed at Vetus, V, you take left. MS-131, you take the right. We've got the left. Simpson whipped around and faced her, staring at her in incredulity, then down at the radar, and then back up at her. You both took the same group, she yelled at him. Don't worry, they got it now. Shoot! Copy, we'll take the right, over, yelled Bassett over the comm. Evasive, evasive, Simpson screamed, and the other tank in tandem roared into action, rolling in reverse and continuing to light up the night sky overhead before us. Treads spinning backwards sent us careening back down 68 toward Russellville. It wasn't helping us out by much. We all knew how fast the Gorgons were. Still, every inch helps to stave off the inevitable, I thought. I heard a terrific crash behind us as the other tank slammed into the charred husk of an abandoned car and then flattened it. We ourselves ran over something as well, though I wasn't sure what it was. I didn't want to know. I looked at the radar screen. The numbers had dwindled. 150 meters, I shouted. What about the DTF? Is it running? Simpson didn't answer. Simpson, I screamed. Foxy shuffled next to me and was breathing hard. Jet, he didn't power it up. He only powered up the tank. Look! I looked at him in fear and then threw my focus to the cab, searching wildly for where he was pointing. There, under the main console, was the DTF power switch, clearly in the off position. Damn it! I screamed, lunging forward and flipping on the switch. 100 meters. We could instantly hear the slow whirring of the emitter build up behind us, growing in strength like one of those old outdoor heat pumps warming up, and then it was spinning like a dryer with a full load of clothes, putting out that blessed 3-second powerful blip. The guns continued thundering, but they kept coming. Were they all trying to bum rush us despite the danger to themselves? Had they figured that if they just ganged up and took out our DTFs, that we'd be defenseless and then they could pick us off? Were they that smart? Vetus hadn't stopped firing, neither had the other tank. Riddled with bullets, Gorgons were peeling off of the main throng and falling to the ground. But the rest were still coming, and now they were clearly pissed off. The humming ballooned into a cacophony. 50 meters. The radar signal blob was almost upon us. I couldn't tell if they were converging on just one or both of us, but there were still far too many of them. Ah! Get down, everybody! Vetus screamed. 25 meters. Get down? I asked wildly toward him. What are you? Wait! No! Vetus! No! My voice cracked from the pressure of the scream as I watched his hand, in near slow motion, move in desperation toward his other trigger. Everything seemed to slow to a crawl. I tried to get to him. He couldn't do this. Vetus could, and Vetus did. In one last desperate attempt, he launched another DTF, a big one, at short range out of his other turret. 10 meters. The tiny candle flew into the sky and exploded in a blinding flash. Our tank literally lifted off the ground momentarily due to the proximity of the colossal burst, and then thudded back down, dislodging every one of us. Curses echoed throughout the cabin. Outside the window, I watched a thunderous rolling pin of dust and light go spinning off across the plain in all directions. The aftermath of that blast. I could make out some of the Gorgons exploding in agony, wrenching and convulsing midair. Most of them slammed into our tank and ricocheted off of us with dull thumps. A few long, spindly arms slapped up against the window as more than one painful shriek was heard outside. Dark blood smeared from an alien hand onto one side of our windshield, and then a fierce spray covered the whole thing. One after another, they fell from the sky in piercing agony, wrenching and wailing in their sonic grief. Our tank rocked left and right from the falling impacts. Others plummeted to earth and skidded down the highway beside us. The other tank fared no better. The Gorgons were dead. The mass of approaching signal was gone from the radar, but so was the radar itself. So was everything else that ran on microchips and circuitry in here. In one fell stroke, Vetus had destroyed the computer systems that powered our tanks, rendering us completely inoperative. We were saved, but unfortunately we were still an hour out from Mammoth Cave, and now we were sitting ducks as well. We were all alone, defenseless, and the road before us was so dark.